One of the most exciting things about working with Gun.io is I get to work with some of the most important consumer brands and fitness brands and enterprise brands. And what you find is that they're all looking for the very best talent and they're competing for it. And one thing I tell clients all the time is that, hey, if you can develop the mindset to hire remote freelance engineers, what you're going to find is that it opens up the pool of available talent, because you're not going to have to fight over the same group of FTEs from all the other companies in your space. And so now what we can do is bring you a cohort of people that other companies aren't competing with you against. And it's really a competitive advantage to take stock of that and find some excellent people you can bring on board.
This is the Frontier Podcast, powered by Gun.io, the engineer's choice for engineering talent. If you like what you hear, rate, review, and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter at TheFrontierPod.
Hey, Jason, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Ledge. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, hey, would you mind tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and company and what you guys are doing?
Sure. So I am the CTO at GaggleAMP. We're a 25-person company. We build an app that lets other companies get their employees involved in their digital marketing. So if you have 1,000 people and you want to spoon feed them content to share on Twitter, LinkedIn, and other networks online, our applications make that process super easy for both your marketing team and the end user employees in your company. And I came on as co-founder with our CEO, Glenn Gaudette, in 2011. We had just an idea and my coding chops and Glenn's selling ability, and we ended up bootstrapping the company. Thought we'd be venture funded. Talked to some investors who didn't quite get the idea, but our customers really loved it. So we just focused on the customers, and we've been doing that for almost 10 years now. And now on the product development side, we have a team of 12. So 3 on what I would call the product design team. So product management plus designers, and 9 engineers.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So, all right. So you wrote all the initial code and now you had to, grow a team of 12. What's that like, man? Share some of the stories on the way there. That's a pretty long journey.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of surprises along the way. We've had a lot of luck finding people who were doing freelancing previously, and then giving them a really good environment to come work in. So that's been our model, is to try to find frustrated freelancers out there and bring them.
We know about that. Yeah,
I know you guys do. But yeah, we just we're very pragmatic in our initial hiring. So I'm a strong backend developer. I'm not the guy who can make it look pretty and not the best one to be tweaking around HTML, and don't have the patience to, back in 2011, or deal with the IE bugs and things like that. So our first hire was a front end engineer who's still with us, which is really cool. And we just kind of just plugged holes, and then one day all of a sudden I was a manager. So once you hit 5 or 6 people, you start realizing you're spending more time helping other people and doing quote unquote management than you are coding on your own.
Yeah, and I talked to a lot of tech leaders who kind of struggle to get out of the code, like don't want to, that they really like doing the code, and switching to a world of like coaching, mentoring, setting standards and doing code reviews and all that is not rewarding. I guess, you did find it rewarding, or at least, rewarding enough, but how do you balance the two things?
For me, it was quite a calibration, and I think I've gone too far off on both sides. So there was one point where when we had, I think 7 or 8 people, and every Wednesday I'd have 15-minute one-on-ones with the whole team, and just boom, 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 boom. And that was the way I was trying to manage the team. And you can't, even like this podcast, we talked for 15-20 minutes just to warm up ahead of time. 15 minutes is not enough time to really have a growth oriented coaching conversation with someone. So I realized that model didn't work. And then, so went down to less frequent one-on-ones. And through the whole thing though, I still have a very strong passion for coding. And I knew I had to segment it out where I would have some ability to do some coding, but also giving the team what they need. And then so it kind of went back and forth between doing less management and more coding, and then more management over the years. And then I would say one of our key hires that helped me out a lot was getting a solid product manager who also had experience in larger organizations. And she was able to come in and set up some really strong processes for us that'll really let us bring the team from about 6-7 people up to 12 where we are now, without the management side becoming too much of a headache. So now a lot of what I used to do in one-on-ones, we have things like going through specific issues, talking about implementation and design strategies, is now handled by regular ceremonies that other team members are leading. So now when I do have a one-on-one, I can focus on what I'm best at, which is just helping them talk through really tough problems or new technologies or other growth ideas that they have. I don't have to spend as much time getting in the weeds and individual features. And then when I'm not doing the one-on-ones, I'm able to really focus on deeply on the projects that I want to be that we're doing that I've chosen to focus on.
Do you kind of switch hats, like when you're, everybody knows you're like the big boss man, right? But I mean, if you're coding and you're a contributing member on the team, do you kind of sit back in a stand up and kind of be like, hey, I'm just another engineer? Like, do you have to like switch hats? Like, how does everybody know? It would be easy, I would think, to like overwhelm a ceremony because like your ideas and opinions would get overweighted because, you're the man, right? Do you have to be deliberate about that? Like, how do you accomplish it?
A lot of it depends on the personalities of the team. So when I think early on we were smaller. It was a lot of our meetings ended up being the Jason show, and I would be driving everything. But we've built a culture where one of the key tenets is taking the initiative. So we want to have everyone step up and fill holes when they see them, and not wait for permission to do that. And now I feel like I get pushed out of ideas a lot in meetings where I'll bring up an argument and then 2 people will jump on me and have 6 reasons that that's wrong and we need to try something else. Or we'll resolve to do if it's like a design meeting, we might resolve to do an A/B test if I have a strong opinion and someone else has a strong opinion, or someone else has a strong opinion. So I think I've been lucky where there's definitely the founder effect and everyone wants to present good news to the boss, but by having strong people who've been in past organizations and have experience, they know to push back on that. And so the focus is really on what's best for the company and what's best for the customer, and not on implementing Jason's vision. So
right.
It's definitely frustrating sometimes, but overall I'm very thankful to have a team that can treat me as Moses coming down from the mountain.
Yeah, I mean it's true. Like your vision got to a certain point, like that it was, it's critically important. So you can't give that away entirely, right? It's like, hey, I innately know some things and I know some patterns of thinking that, matter. But you also need to have like the ego swallowing event of like getting out of the way. And this thing is going to evolve past me. I think every founder goes through that, not just in engineering. Like if we want to grow this, it becomes not, sort of just my thing anymore. I'm curious.
But I end up having a lot of conversations along those lines of we're getting too involved in something. We're going to end up being the bottleneck. So how do we
extract?
Give that up, or maybe it's something that's just not that important, and we can leave it unmanaged for a period of time.
Sure. Yeah. I would imagine a good product manager sort of disposition is going to lead you in the direction of, sort of building for the customer anyway. So that's another reason that a hire like that, is super important. It's also one of those things where you're kind of like, that's an expensive investment, like a person that focuses on product. Like, what does that mean? We're engineers. Like, we can do this ourselves. Like, we build the thing. I don't know. What was that mindset like to understand that product, is a function that's pretty hot now. I don't think in the last couple of years that is as mind blowing as it might have been, some years ago.
From my experience, hiring that first product manager, it was a perfect example of getting the right person who then figured out what the role was, what I thought the role was. And I was freelancing before GaggleAMP and hadn't worked in any other company before. So I didn't even really know what the product management function was or was supposed to do. So what I thought we needed was just someone to write requirements and get things ready for the engineers. And it ended up being a lot more than that. Plus, we brought in someone who I thought was really strong in the role and went above and beyond the role. So she was able to introduce a lot of other processes and do things beyond just what a product manager would do.
One thing I've seen with product management is, particularly from a larger company disposition, that there's a sort of dual role of what I would maybe call like delivery manager and product, because that process stuff isn't the pure, product manager kind of role that you read out of the textbook. That is all of that, like talk to the users and, get all the feedback and write user stories and stuff. But, oh no, don't let me touch all that process, and Scrum and ceremony stuff. That would leave the Scrum Master to do that. So, have you merged those worlds?
They were merged here for a while. We experimented a couple times with getting a dedicated project manager, but we found that the activities that person or that role we were expecting that role to do were really hard to do if you weren't a product manager or an engineer. So kind of having someone non-technical who was, at least for how we were approaching it, it didn't really work out. So what we've done is taken that release management role, and it's shared amongst our engineering team at this point.
Oh, right on.
So, but that was one of the things that our product manager brings up a lot in conversations with me, is she didn't want to be doing those activities because it's not her core skill set, even though that's what the company needed at the time. So you're still trying to figure out that balance now. Eventually we probably need some kind of dedicated head of engineering to work with our head of product, but we're not there today.
Yeah. Cool. So what have you learned about scaling the product? You're dealing with big clients. You got a lot of, I guess, probably a lot of transactional work. You're talking about thousands and thousands of people and trying to get, things done, and walk through some of those like design decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our modus operandi is primarily to take feedback from customers and bring that into our product design. So we'll do a mock-up and then go have a conversation with 4 or 5 customers around it, capture that feedback in our wiki, and then use that to inform the design process. And usually when we have a design meeting that goes off the rails, where we're getting too focused on minute points, someone will raise their hand and say, hey, let's go back and review the customer use case and make sure we're aligned there. So having that, always referring back to the use case and the specific request of the customer, has helped us make really good design decisions. The other thing that we decided to do, I think about 18 months now, so we're just 18 months ago now that we're just starting to release, is do a platform rewrite. So we had this code base that I had written however many thousands of lines in 2011 and 2012, 2013, mostly by myself. And then we brought in more engineers, and we kept changing design preferences and just architecture willy-nilly. It's kind of like someone would watch a talk and we'd implement a pattern. So we started over with there was some new functionality that we wanted to build, so we decided to start that as a new application rather than building it into our existing application. And that did slow down product development for a period of time, but it's going to give us a much better foundation to go forward for the next 3 to 5 years once that's fully ready.
So we've had a lot of people talk about, the trade-offs and, monolith or microservice, or you sound like maybe you landed somewhere between the two, or you're breaking off pieces of the application, but maybe not micro service. I don't know. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we tried going down the microservices path. That was one of the architectural expeditions that we went on, and just found that there's more and more functionality that depended on copalines, and we ended up having to figure out APIs and things that would have just been a single method call in a monolith. So decided to focus on the monolith, and then with wanting to start over with a new architecture, we have basically 2 monoliths that talk to each other now.
How did you make that segmentation? Is that just a functional segmentation? Like, it makes sense to have 2 applications?
Yes, it basically the new functionality with everything that goes along with that model view controllers stuff is in the new application, but then it makes API calls and some new UI, but it makes API calls back to the old application. And I think eventually we may end up just bringing all of the old functionality into the new application and cutting off those APIs. But as a time to market thing, that made the most sense to have the business logic already in the old application that we can reuse, be accessible over APIs, and then build the net new functionality in the new application.
Right. So it was less of a bog down the whole company in V2, and like a pragmatic choice to, at least, hey, let's just separate out, allow ourselves to use some old foundational work, but not be saddled with the entire old application there. That's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you talked about, I guess you made a move over the course of time to cloud and now serverless. Love to hear best practices there. Like, what have you learned? And that you're on Ruby. So I don't hear Ruby and serverless all the time. So that's an interesting story.
So I think AWS just released Ruby support in November or October of last year. So we are just working on our first functions, I guess we could call them, in Ruby that we're going to deploy on serverless. For us, the one place we do use sort of microservices is not really, we're not doing a lot of like microservices calling other microservices, but if there is some standalone functionality that just is highly decoupled, we'll throw it into a function. So for example, we have some report generation functionality for customers that wanted custom data exports, and that we've built into serverless functions because it just calls the database, generates some CSVs, and then pushes those to an external FTP server. So rather than putting some code for one specific customer into our monolith, this we could just have in Lambda, and it's totally separate. Don't have to worry about it breaking anything, and if it breaks, we know it only impacts that one customer. So for use cases like that, the isolation made a lot of sense.
So you don't have to fork your main products. You can stay multi-tenant SaaS, but you can use serverless to introduce some ancillary functions for a given client. And did you ever think then, maybe it doesn't happen, but is serverless almost like the sandbox to allow you to test stuff out that you might roll back into the monolith, or is it just hey, it's going to be out there forever?
I haven't thought of it as a sandbox, but some of the reporting things we do for one client end up being useful for other clients. So it's possible. The code that we've put in serverless is just highly, at least the first functions were highly specific to one customer. So they basically ordered it as a custom work order. So it made a lot of sense. And that's I would say in general, what we're using serverless for is some instance of moving data around. Whether it's sending it to an external system. We also use it to sync some tables in the database. For example, there's one table that we sync between the old application and the new application, and we use a serverless function to handle that ETL process.
Was it like a performance thing, or like more just like easy abstraction, or I mean, why not do that as part of the normal application? Like, how did you decide what to put out there, in that paradigm?
In this case, we had some user settings that we wanted to keep in the new application and the old application, that both the old application's functionality and the new application's functionality depended on. So in that case, as we looked at the use case, having the sync process made the most sense. And it was, since it's specific to one user, and it's part of the setup and onboarding, it made more sense than calling out to that table over an API.
Right. Okay. Yeah. When you made the new application, did you have to deal with like a totally new data model too, where you have to kind of ETL yourself then during that process?
So the one place we do have a sort of microservice is we have a single sign-on server. So that handles, at least over OAuth, handles setting up user accounts in both systems. So we had the ability of a user to log in without needing to set up an ETL was already set up through the single sign-on server. So other than that one table for user settings that I was just talking about, we haven't done any other ETLs. Everything's either only in one application, only in the other, or accessible over an API.
Right on. So what you learned from the customer like feedback process, that's I don't know, tips and tricks, from finding out from customers. I mean, one thing we always know is like every customer has an opinion. Like, how do you know which things are worth rolling into your product or not? I mean, they're going to tell you to do all the things they want. And every customer has a different opinion. So how do you do a signal to noise, analysis on that?
I don't know if we have any general, I guess at the very general level, we have a community board where it's like a feature request board where people can vote up ideas, and we look at the top ideas every quarter. So that's a place where we're looking for multiple customers asking for a feature. There's always the situation of a salesperson just needs this one feature to close a deal that comes up. We're selling to enterprises. So usually they have 3 to 5 things that they want customized. So we handle those requests. We build in some time in our schedule every quarter to handle those requests. And if there gets to be too many of them, then we push back on the sales team and kind of force them to do the prioritization for us.
Yeah.
And then there's some. It's funny, like almost every kind of design decision you make that limits the functionality, as you scale, you're going to find someone who wants the opposite. So, for example, one that came up recently is we have a leaderboard functionality where when marketing puts a piece of content in our system, and the members then share it, they get a certain number of points. Well, we added a reset feature to that would turn off it would basically, the idea is you reset the leaderboard back to 0 when you click the reset button, so that if they want to do like a monthly contest, they can reset it. And we have a contingent of customers that want just like a pure reset. And then we have others that if there's something that's alive in our system that's available to share before and after the reset time, then it becomes unfair because the members who already shared it got their points zeroed out, but then the members who didn't share it yet can still get points for those messages. So it makes the whole system unfair. And we end up with, we implemented it the way where if something was live in the system before you hit reset, nobody can get points on the leaderboard after the reset for that thing, even though they shared it at time after the leaderboard reset, because of the fairness argument. But now we're having customers come back and say, well, I just wanted to reset and I didn't care about this fairness point. So it's, you're going to be constantly surprised in any sort of limitation that we put in, even for a fairness reason or gamification reason. Someone comes up and doesn't like it. So we try to model Ruby on Rails with configuration or convention over configuration, but a lot of times what the customer really wants is configuration and wants a more complex set of options so they can better fit their use case. So that's some place we balance a lot, is how much flexibility do we give versus how much do we just make it have one way to do it, and the customers have to take it or leave it that way.
Well, I'll leave that as our final thought, that you only need to deal with this problem once you have customers that are so passionately debating about your product. So
it's a good problem to have.
Right, exactly. Yeah, don't go out of your way to sort of do all these things at the beginning. Once you have customers that have an opinion, you have customers for the long term. So that's a good thing. Well, Jason, hey, good spending time with you, man. Love the insights, and we'll be paying attention.
Yep. Thanks for the time, Ledge. It's great to meet you.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast, produced by Gun.io. We're the only freelancing platform where engineers actually go to hire other engineers. If you enjoyed the show and want to learn more about how to hire or freelance with us, head over to gun.io/podcast to get in touch, and we'll pay for your first 10 hours with a kick-ass engineer.